course you know, water is one of the most basic elements for plant growth. There's a few things you need to know to water your garden effectively. Of course, the weather determines how much water you're going to need to put in your garden. If it's a hot day, your plants will react by looking wilted. Another factor to determine if you need to water is your soil type. Clay soils retain moisture, whereas sandy soils dry out a lot quicker. The best way to assess your soil moisture is to actually grab a handful of your soil. If you grab your soil and squeeze it in, water soaks out between your fingers, or it makes a ball that cannot be easily broken up, your soil is plenty moist and you don't need to water. If you grab your soil and it falls apart in a dry, dusty clump, you should start thinking about watering. Overhead irrigation is one of the most common ways to water your garden. One way to overhead irrigate is with an oscillator. You see these used mostly to water lawns in large areas. Children love to water their gardens with watering cans. Sometimes we can't even get them to stop watering the garden. Another way to water overhead is with a fan. One thing to be careful of is not to flood your soil like I'm doing right here. Instead of flooding, you want to make multiple passes. Once you see your soil start to get shiny, you should pull off and let the moisture soak into the soil. When using a watering can, you often have to make many passes as well. And remember not to flood your soil. To check if you've watered appropriately, it's always a good idea to do the finger test and poke into the soil and see if the moisture has percolated into the soil to the depth of the roots. Drip irrigation is the best way to irrigate your garden beds. This example here are components that you'd actually put in your garden bed. What these pipes and tubes do is bring water down right to the root level of the plant. Using a Y splitter like this one makes it so that you can have your irrigation system set up and have a free spigot for water. Here we have an example of an irrigation system that's irrigating our border area. We have a main water line that splits off and connects to some drip lines throughout the vegetation. We also have included on-off valves to water different sections of our border.
Here we've got drip irrigation on an annual veggie bed. We've got the water coming in here. We've got a valve here that can turn on and off, and then the drip line going to the vegetables.
Here we're going to set up a drip irrigation system for your garden bed. It starts with a water supply line like this garden hose, and then it connects to an on-off valve, a pressure regulator, and a filter. From the filter, we connect to the supply line that is going to bring the water into our garden bed. Working with this black poly hose, you have a lot of options to create a system any way you can imagine. Poly hose is easily cut with a pair of garden shears. Note we have right angles to avoid kinks and to keep the poly hose right up against the side of the bed so kids won't trip. One other thing to note about poly hose is that it can be buried in your garden. So you could set up an irrigation system across your whole garden using poly hose underground and bring it up to each garden bed. Now we're going to connect the drip lines to our main supply line. I'm going to poke a hole along the blue line in our supply line and connect the drip line with a barbed connector. These are easily put together by pushing the barb into the pipe and taking the other side of the barb and putting it into your supply line. It snaps when it's in there correctly. I'll continue to place these across our supply line. An alternative to using a straight barbed connector is a barbed connector that has an on-off valve. This allows to have more of a custom irrigation system where you can turn each line on or off. Once again, the barbs slide into the tube and then snap into your main line. An alternative to using this spaghetti micro drip line is using T-tape. It connects similar with the barb into your main line, but it has a quick lock system to connect the T-tape to the water supply. Now I've stretched out the drip line across the bed and I'm going to cut it to size and cap the end with a cap or plug. Staple your irrigation lines in place with a landscape staple. It's simple as just pinning your irrigation line down. So the last step is to flush our line to clear any debris that might have landed in the pipe as we've assembled our system. And then we're going to bend this line back on itself and use a figure 8 connection here to end the flow of the water. As you can see, this isn't rocket science. All you need is basic parts, hand pruners, a hole punch, and you're ready to go. But one word of caution, when you purchase drip materials, try to purchase the same brand and from the same store so you don't have issues of pieces not fitting.